Hey guys, this is the 2.1 and 2.2 online practice quiz for your e-learning today. And so we're reviewing section 2.1, which was converting fractions, decimals to fractions, and ordering them from least to greatest. And then also reviewing what we did in section 2.2 on Tuesday, which was adding fractions and decimals with negatives. So we'll review that on 10 questions. This video will stop every time that I'm finished with a problem to give you a chance to write down all the work on your work paper and answer the question that you're going to have through Edpuzzle. So what we'll do is you'll need to write down all the work and all the answers on your work paper, and then when you come in on Thursday, I'll let you turn it in early. It's not technically due until Friday, but I'll let you turn in your work papers early so I can give you credit for that, and I know that you followed along on the video. Also, just want to remind you that we have section 2.1 homework due today. That's from Monday, and it's due by 2:30 today. So don't forget about that. And then also we have the section 2.2 homework from yesterday, and that's going to be due Thursday when you come back. So if you have any questions over those two homework assignments, make sure you email me so I can respond back to you. So let's start with number one. This is from section 2.1. We're converting -5 4/5 into a decimal. And so to do that, we're going to take the number that's in front of the fraction, and we're just going to rewrite it, but in front of the decimal. We don't actually do anything special with the -5 other than rewrite it. And then the 4/5, in order to turn a fraction into a decimal, we do top, which is the 4, divided by the bottom number, which is the 5. And so I know 5 doesn't go into 4, so I'm going to put a decimal point in my problem, a decimal point in my answer, and then a 0. And 5 goes into 40 exactly 8 times. You might have already known that 4/5 was 0.8, and if you did, you wouldn't have to do that side work. But we have -5 4/5 is -5.8. Number 2 gives us a decimal, and it wants us to write a fraction. And the key here to number 2 is it wants us to write a fraction in simplest form. That means it needs to be reduced. So it's negative, so I'm going to write a negative sign. And then to write a decimal as a fraction, write the number 84 over its place value. It's in the hundredths column because it has 2 decimal places. So we're going to write it over 100. If it just had 1 decimal place, we'd write it over 10. If it has 3 decimal places, we'd write it over 1,000. And we just keep going. And so both of these numbers can be reduced. They're both even, so a good place to start is by reducing them by 2. There might be a bigger number that goes in. And so if you can find a bigger number that goes in, that will save you some time. If you reduce it by 2, that's like taking half of it. This is going to turn into -42 over 50. And so they're still both even, so we can reduce by another 2. And half of 42 is 21. And half of 50 is 25. And that can't reduce. So this is our final answer, -21 over 25. Now, if I can pull out a 2 twice, that means I could have just from the get-go divided by 4 and jumped straight to the 25, and divided by 4 and jumped straight to the 21. But if you didn't see that, dividing by 2 isn't that complicated. You just have to do it twice. The next problem is number 3, and it wants us to order these numbers from least to greatest. We have -3 1/8, -13 fourths, which is improper, -2.3, which is a decimal, and -14 fifths, which is also an improper fraction. And so remember, anytime that we want to order them from least to greatest, we want to convert all of our fractions into decimals. They're easier to compare that way. And so I have 3 numbers here that I need to convert into decimals. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to write the improper fractions as mixed numbers. That might be easier to work with them that way. So 4 goes into 13 3 times. That's 12 with 1 left over. So I'm going to write it like that. 5 goes into 14 2 times. That's 10 with 4 left over. I'm going to write it like that. And the reason I'm going to write it like that is it's easier for me to write these numbers as decimals if you already know what 1/4 is. If you know 1/4 is 0.25, then you don't need to do any of that long division work off to the side. And if you know your fifths, then you probably know that 4/5 is 0.8. In fact, we just did that in the previous, was it the previous problem or number 1 maybe? Yeah, it was number 1, where we had 4/5, and we said it was 0.8. And if you don't know it, go off to the side and work it off to the side. Okay? We already know this one's negative 2.3. Okay, so I've got negative 2.3. I've got negative 2.8. I've got negative 3.25. And then now I need to go off to the side here and turn 1/8. Now, you might already know what your eighths are. If you don't, you might have some long division that you need to show. So the negative 3 is just going to go in front of the decimal point. And then I'm going to go off the side and do 1 divided by 8. Okay, I've got to put the top number. Top dog gets the house. Top number goes inside the box. I'm going to put a decimal point immediately since I know 8 doesn't go into 1. Also got to put a decimal point in the answer above. 8 goes into 10 one time. That's 8. Subtract, I get 2. Drop down to 0. 8 goes into 20 twice. That's 16. Subtract, and you get 4. 8 goes into 40 exactly 5 times. Subtract, and you won't get a remainder at all. So maybe you already knew that 1/8 was 0.125. If not, now you do. So negative 3 and 1/8 is going to be negative 3.125. And now we have all of our numbers turned into decimals. So now we're going to arrange them. I'm going to have to zoom out here because I'm running out of room. We're going to arrange them from least to greatest, it says. So I'm going to start with my negative numbers because my negative numbers are always smaller than positive numbers. But unfortunately, they're all negative here. So that doesn't give us an out here. We have to actually look at them. So when I'm arranging negative numbers, the number that is the most negative is going to be the smallest. And so I'm looking at either this one or this one as the number that's the most negative. So this one has 3 decimal places. This one does not. So before you say, well, 125 is bigger than 25, it's not fair for this one to have 3 decimal places. Maybe I should put a 0 right there and make that one have 3 decimal places. And now you can see that 250 or 0.25 is bigger than 0.125. So our smallest number, if I'm arranging them from least to greatest, our smallest number is negative 3.25. And then our next smallest number will be the negative 3.125. Okay, so I've accounted for this problem, this one, and this one. Okay, and then now I've got the negative 2.3 and the negative 2.8 here and here. And so the one that's the most negative is the negative 2.8. So it's going to be the next smallest. And then the largest one of this entire group is the negative 2.3. because it's the least negative, so it's closest to 0. It's going to have the highest value. So on your quiz or test that you'll take on Monday, you can arrange them like this and leave them as decimals, or if you want to write them in their original form, we would have, technically this was negative 13/4, and then this one was negative, which one was this? Negative 3 1/8. And then this one was negative 14/5. And then this one was just already written as negative 2.3 or negative 2.30. So I'll accept either one of these as answers. I would, honestly, if it was me, I'd probably just go ahead and leave them in their decimal form because you have to convert them to decimals anyways. All right, number 4 has us adding these numbers. And so in order to add these, I have to, well, there's a couple different things I could do. First, probably the way most of you have learned to do this is turn these into improper fractions. And so to do that, I have to multiply and then add. So 10 times 2 is 20, plus 3 is 23 over 10. Don't forget it's negative. And then I'm going to add that with, let's see, 5 times 4 is 20, plus 2 is 22, 22/5. And then I can find a common denominator. The lowest common denominator that we would use is the 10, because all I have to do is multiply the 5 by 2 to get that, and I don't have to change the first fraction at all. It's going to stay negative 23 over 10. And then 22 times 2 is 44. So now I would look at my signs. They're different signs, so I'm going to subtract. I'm going to write the largest number on top when I do that. 44 minus 23 is 21. And I'm going to keep the sign of the larger number. And I have more positives than negatives there. So it's going to be positive 21 over 10. And then I'm going to see if I can reduce that. And I can't, because the only factors other than 1 in itself that go into 10 are 2 and 5, and neither 2 nor 5 go into 21. So I can leave that as 21 over 10 if you feel compelled to write your answer as a mixed number. In fact, this one does say write your answer as a mixed number, so I guess I have to follow their instructions. Then I would say 10 goes into 21 2 times with 1 left over. 10 times 2 is 20, so there's 1 left over. So I would say this is positive 2 and 1/10 as my answer. Now, I'm okay if you leave it as an improper fraction, but the instructions on this particular problem said you needed to write it as a mixed number. Number 5 wants you to add 2.65 and 3.12. There aren't even any negatives in this problem, so I don't even have to worry about it. Like checking my signs, both signs are positive, so same signs, keep the sign and add, right? I'm just going to put the larger number on top. It doesn't really matter when you're adding, it just matters when you're subtracting, but I like to get in that habit of always putting the larger number on top. I'm going to add these together. 2 and 5 makes 7, 1 and 6 also makes 7. Drop down your decimal point, and 3 and 2 makes 5. So when you add or subtract decimals, you must line up those decimal points. And so we get 5.77. Number 6 says, evaluate negative 4x plus y when x is 5/4 and y is 1/5. And again, it wants us to write our answer as a mixed number. I'm not a big fan of that, but I have to use their rules here, right, as answer as a mixed number. So let's go ahead and get started with that. We're going to start by plugging in 5/4 for x. I'm just going to use parentheses there so that doesn't look like a mixed number, plus y, which is 1/5. So just plugged in the x equals 5/4 and y equals 1/5. Now, this is actually a problem that we would do next week when we're multiplying with fractions, but I know that you guys already remember how to multiply with fractions. It was on our Chapter 2 opener. So all I have to do to turn 4 into a fraction is by put it over 1 there. And then I'm multiplying the negative 4 with the x, which is 5/4. So if I'm multiplying fractions, I try to cancel them. And what I can do is I can actually cancel the 4's here. Just as if I was reducing 4 over 4, even though they're diagonal from each other, I can cancel any top number with any bottom number. And since 4 goes into 4 itself one time, they both turn into 1's. And so now I just do negative 1 times 5, which is negative 5, and negative 1 times 1, which is 1. So negative 5 over 1, which is just negative 5. But then I also have to add 1/5 to this. So because I have to add 1/5 to this, I want you to think about this for a second. We have different signs, so I have to subtract. Now, if you had negative 5, and you had 5, right? A different sign subtract. So if you had 5 and you had to subtract away 1/5, think about that. If you had 5 and you have to take away 1/5, there'd be 4 left. And then if you take 1/5 away, there'd be 4/5 remaining. And so since my larger number is negative, I would make it a negative 4 and 4/5. Okay, so this would be my final answer then. Maybe that confused you. That's okay. I'll go up and write this as a fraction. So this would be, again, negative 5 over 1, but my common denominator has to be a 5, so negative 25 over 5 is what I'd turn that into. And then I'm going to add that with 1/5. And so different signs subtract, I'm going to get negative 24 over 5. And then when I have to write it as a mixed number, 5 goes into 24 4 times. That's 20 with 4 left over. And it was negative. So either way, you're going to get negative 4 and 4/5. I just like to think like, okay, like I got 5. If I take a fifth of that away, I'm going to have 4 and 4/5. So I like jumping right into my answer from there. Okay, so negative 4 and 4/5. Number 7 is going to make us write these numbers from least to greatest again. So I have to rewrite my fraction problems, and I have 3 of them again, as decimals. Now, these are absolute value signs around 2 of these numbers, just so you know. So they're going to combine one of our sections from last chapter, absolute value. Negative 1 and 4/5 is the same as negative 1.8. We've done 4/5. This is the 3rd time they've asked us to do 4/5 as a decimal. And then the next one here is going to be positive, because when you take the absolute value of any number, it's positive. So this would be just 7/4, or I could write it as 1 3/4 if I write it as a mixed number. And if you know your fourths, you know that's going to be the same as 1.75. 3/4 is 75 cents. The absolute value here is going to turn this into positive 2.2. And then over here, 3/2 is the same as 1 1/2. And if you know your halves, you know 1/2 is 0.5. So this would be 1.5. So here are my numbers then. I've got negative 1.8, positive 1.75, positive 2.2, and positive 1.5. I have to order them from least to greatest. Let's do that. I'm going to start with the negative number because it's the only one that is negative. It has to be the smallest. So negative 1.8 is the smallest one I have. After negative 1.8, they're all positive, and so I've got 1.75, 2.2, and 1.5. So it's really between these two. And I can go ahead and make this 1.50, so they both have 2 decimal places, and we can see 1.50 is a little bit smaller than 1.75. So 1.5, and then 1.75 would be the next one, and then 2.2 has to be my largest one. And so I could just leave them like this. They're arranged from least to greatest. Negative 1.8, positive 1.5, 1.75, and 2.2. All right, number 8 says a rectangle has side lengths of 1 3/4 feet and 2 1/3 feet. Find the perimeter of the rectangle. You guys did perimeter before. Perimeter is where you add all the sides up, and if it's a rectangle, it's going to have 4 sides. Also, if it's a rectangle, that means there's 2 lengths and 2 widths on it. And so I'm going to add those numbers up. So I'm going to do 1 3/4 plus 1 3/4 plus 2 1/3 plus 2 1/3. I'm just going to add them all together. Okay, so what I would do is I'd probably just leave them as mixed numbers. 1 plus 1 is 2. 3 plus 3 is 6. So 2 6/4. I'll come back to that in just a second because that doesn't look right. And then 2 1/3 and 2 1/3 is going to make 4 2/3. Okay, I'm just going to add those together. Now, the 2 6/4 doesn't look right, and I can't leave it like that. 6/4 is the same as 1 2/4. So I'm going to add that onto the 2 that I already have. I'm going to make this whole thing, just make it 3 2/4, which is the same as 3 1/2, actually. All right, so now I've got 3 1/2 and 4 2/3, and I have to add these together. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a way to not have to convert these into improper fractions. We'll work more with this later this week, but I told you I would show you guys a way to convert these, to do this without having to use improper fractions. So I still need a common denominator though. So the first one up here, I'll say 3, and my common denominator, the first multiple that 2 and 3 both have in common is 6. So 3 and something over 6, in fact it's a half, so if I times by 3, it have to be 3 over 6. And then for this one, it's going to be 4, and then if my denominator is 6, I times the 3 by 2 to get that 6, so 2 times 2 is 4. Okay? And so now I have this problem of 3 3/6 plus 4 4/6. Still haven't used improper fractions. So what I do is I add my fraction parts together, which is 7 6. Then I add my whole number parts together, which is 3 plus 4, which is 7. 7 and 7 6. Now, can't leave it like that. Can't have an improper fraction right here with my whole number. So 7 and 7 6 is the same as 1 and 1/6. Okay, that's the same as 1 and 1/6. Add that to the 7 you already have, and that makes it 8 and 1/6. And that's how you can add these numbers without having to write them as improper fractions and say, do all that side work of improper fractions. So the perimeter here is going to be 8 and 1/6, and I do have to label it. And they're talking about feet. So altogether, my perimeter is going to be 8 and 1/6 feet. Go ahead and include that label on your work paper. Number 9, here's another question where we're asked to kind of arrange these numbers from least to greatest, and they give us 3 fractions again, so we need to go ahead and convert these. This is the same. 2 goes into 11 5 times with 1 left over, so that's the same as negative 5 1/2. 4 goes into 9 twice, that's 8 with 1 left over, so that's negative 2 and 1/4. And then this one's already a mixed number. And so now I'm going to convert it into decimals, and I should already have these memorized. I should know that a half is 0.5, so negative 5.5. I should know that a fourth is 0.25, so negative 2.25. And I should know that a half again is 0.5, so negative 3.5. And this one already is written as a decimal, negative 3.2. And so it says, which of the cities is table shows the high temperatures, 4 different cities on a specific day. Which cities reach a warmer temperature than Snowville? And so Snowville is this negative 3.5 right here. That's Snowville. And so which of them are warmer or bigger than negative 3.5? Well, negative 2.25 is bigger, and negative 3.2 is bigger. Negative 5.5 is colder. It's more negative, so it's a smaller number. And so I'm going to choose Breezetown and Iceberg as my 2 cities that actually have a warmer temperature than Snowville. So Breezetown and Iceberg. And so that's actually it. We're actually not going to do number 10. I'm going to leave you just with the first 9 for this. We've done a good job reviewing turning fractions into decimals, decimals into fractions. We even added and subtracted some fractions and decimals and then arranged them from least to greatest. And that's really what this whole section was meant to review with you guys. So please make sure that you remember that section 2.1 homework is due today. And then section 2.2, if you didn't finish it from Tuesday, that's due Thursday. And then this is technically due Friday, but you should have it done by now, right? You just wrote all the answers, all the work and all the answers down. So if you've got this work paper ready to hand in on Thursday when you come back, I'll take it from you and you'll be done with it. So have a great rest of your day.